Hey there, gang. This is part 2 of my grading video on some Bronze Age X-Men comics. Let's not waste any time. We'll get right into it, picking up where the last video left off. So if you like comic books, stick around. We are going to have some fun. So again, we've got 2 of the same book. I think this is our last sample of a duplicate. And again, you can see the difference here, how brilliant and white this one is as opposed to how worn this one is. Now here's a good spot to mention, something that again really doesn't factor into the grade, but I mean, these things were mass produced. They were made for consumers, not really intended to be saved. So these weren't high-end collectibles by any means, and you can see how they would roll off the press with the cover. In this case, the book is square, but the cover is more to the edge. Some of it's been chopped off, and you've got what is really the spine and the back showing. Whereas this one is cut, well, almost to the other degree. You have the front cover kind of folded over into the spine and almost coming through to the back. And you can see how there's here you can't see Sasquatch's forearm at all, and there it is. But something like that makes just about zero difference in the grade, and you may, as a buyer, find one to be more desirable than the other. I certainly like one, if this was a better grade, I would probably prefer this one rather than this one where you've got that big white space along the edge. This one is the full cover image. But that's not really going to, unless it's really, really obvious or profound, a printing variation like that isn't going to make much difference either way, either for or against. There are very few instances where a printing defect enhances the grade, such as Wolverine number 145 with the adamantium claws. They were supposed to be done in silver foil, and there's some where the foil didn't take and it's just white. There's also Fantastic Four number 110, where there was a coloring defect on part of the run and all of the faces are green. Everybody, they're going into the negative zone on the cover, and they all look pretty sick about it. It's a rough ride. But something like this, no difference in the grade as to that. But what does make a difference, of course, is the variation in the handling. So this one, you got some blunting right here, and you've got a little bit of a micro tear right there. When I say micro tear, that's like 1/8 of an inch or less. And that one's maybe about 1/8 of an inch. You got a few stresses here along the spine, but nothing that really breaks the color. Of course, the fact that there's no color helps to disguise, the depth of any tears and stresses that might be there. This corner is blunted a little bit, but the edges are pretty tight. Overall, nice gloss, nice eye appeal. The back is pretty brilliantly white. Almost no stressing here on this side of the spine. Everything looks good, except you've got a kind of a fold, not really a fold, but like a bandit. Got compressed there somehow. It's on the opposite end of this tear, which is kind of strange. But the paper looks good, pretty white. Centerfold's nice. Centerfold's not quite aligned. Sticks out a little more on one side than the other, and that's why you've got that little bit of a blunting right here where the paper has stuck out further than the rest of the pages. Everything else looks good. So this one I am going to call an 8. I'm actually going to call this one an 8.5, even though it's got this little tear here. Everything else about this book is super clean. Without that tear and that fold, which is kind of minor because it's not really a fold of any kind, meaning it's not folded over. It just got bent there somehow. I would probably call this 9, maybe a 9.2, but I think I'm going to go with an 8.5 on that. This book, however. So we've got some overall soiling. This whole edge is compressed in with lots of little minor tears. You can see one right there along the edge. That's all pressed in. We've got about a 1/4 inch bottom spine split. We got some fairly heavy tears and stresses along the spine. This end is, again, abraded, blunted, rubbed up against something. We've got a little bit of a, not quite a water stain, but a little bit of a moisture wrinkle right there. The back, look at how that's pressed up. That's been folded several times. That's dog-eared. You get a little rip there. Folding here and here. Can you see those? Hard to see with the white, I know, but there's a fold. There's 2 folds. There's another one. That's all blunted in. This paper is definitely tan. Bordering on browning. We got a little bit of foxing on the inside cover. Can you see that? Those little, they look like stains, those dots right in there. That's called foxing. That's basically the beginning kind of mold. And that is definitely a moisture wrinkle up here at the top. So there was like a drop of water on the edge of this book. And that foxing is coming from right here. There's some moisture. It could be from humidity or something. And you can see it's starting to stain as well as the browning. So this book I'm going to call a 4. And I will note, even though it's folded and you can see it, I will note in the description that there is a 1/4 inch spine split and some light foxing on the inside cover. That's pretty ugly. So here you go. This is your difference. Again, I hope you can see this fairly well on the camera. But this is your difference between an 8.5 and a 4. And again, looking at the back, how brilliant and blemish-free that is, as opposed to much uglier and tanner and all folded up. All right. So this book, we got a big stress right there. Kind of a stress fold here, a lot of blunting there. Big abrasions on this corner. Heavy stresses and tears along the spine there. Soiling in the back. Some folds here, some folding there. I think this one's another 4. Here's my center fold. Nice and tight. Staples are a little off center, but the center fold's pretty tight. And here's another thing, again, this doesn't really affect the book, but the printing is kilted. You can see how, it's closer to the edge here than it is here. And I don't know how many pages inside, almost all the pages are like that, although it looks like it gets a little better as we go through the book. But as long as it's minor like that, it doesn't really affect the grade at all. This is another one I'm going to call a 4. I would be tempted to go to a 4 or 5 if some of these weren't quite so heavy. And if we didn't have this fold, or if we didn't have that fold on the back, maybe with a little less soiling. I'll call that a 4. All right, this one's pretty rough. A lot of stressing here. Super blunted here. The corner's almost gone. Folding here. A lot of stressing along this edge where it's been basically manhandled. Stressing here. Color gloss is faded off. Back isn't as bad as I had feared, but still you get a fold here, a lot of kind of wrinkling. Some of those stresses come all the way through. Blunting where the whole edge has been bent back right there. Pages a little off-white. Miss my centerfold. There it is. It's all right, I guess. This one I'm going to a 3.5. I'd call it a 4, except for all of this. I mean, it runs the whole length of the book there, where it's all just, folded in, pressed in, blunted in, and you get multiple stress lines going that whole way with multiple small micro tears. So I'm calling that a 3.5. And this one looks a little nicer. Well, I said nicer until I started looking at it. We have some stressing here, although not nearly as bad. Some folds here, pretty heavy. Lighter one there. Blunting. Fold. A lot of stresses up through here. Heavy fold there. A lot of stressing here in the back. You can see those ones we saw on the front that looked fairly light are all kind of heavy here. And when you can see them that well in the white, although the fact that it's soiling helps to pick them up, then you know it's pretty heavy. But again, it's tight, it's complete. But I think this one's going to be a 4. Now, if it had, all of this stressing here on the spine, let's say didn't have these folds right here, 1, 2, 3, I might could go to a 4 or 5. It's also got a stress right there that breaks that bit of black color. But as it is, I think it's got to be a 4. And someone who's really picky might even call that a 3.5. But I'm going to call it a 4. If somebody buys it and complains and says it's really a 3.5 or a 3, I'll let you know. Well, here's a good example of like a 5. Maybe a 4 or 5. Blunting here. Pretty heavy stressing around that bottom staple. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A whole bunch right in there, pretty heavy. Another trio right there, pretty heavy. Top staple. And pretty heavy there, and that's a rough spine. We got a tear here. There's a little piece. Can you see where it's kind of folded back? It's ripped off and folded back. That corner is folded. A little tiny stain down here at the bottom. Got another stain right here. But it's complete, it's tight. There's everything that was on Saturday morning back then in 1978. I remember Jason of Star Command. Actually, I remember all of these things. Kids today don't have Saturday morning. I don't know what they do. But, yeah, this is going to be another 4. Yeah. At first, you almost want to go to a 4 or 5, but when you get a look at that stressing there, plus the fact that we're missing a little piece here, it's not missing, it's hanging on by a thread. There are no stains in the back, that's another 4. Another 4. I hope I'm speaking loud enough. I kind of talking to myself here. All right, well, here's one that's maybe a little closer to a 5. So we have a lot of stresses right in through here. There's some blunting here. But all of these stresses are fairly minor. You got a kind of a heavy one there and a little blunting. The very tip of that corner is folded back. A little discoloration there. Some general shabbiness. Paper quality is decent. Can't find that centerfold. I think I passed it. I think I passed it again. There it is. Looks good. Huh. So you can see the red ink from the cover is bleeding through to the inside page, inside cover, and this whole edge is kind of compressed. So I think I'm going to call this a 5. But for this or this, I could go 5-5. But for all of this compression along this edge, might even get up to a 6. But we're going to go with a 5. It's a pretty good 5, but nonetheless. All right. I think this one's going to be a 4 or 5. So, you know, fairly decent eye appeal until we get looking at it and we see you got a heavy blunting here, some stresses here, lighter ones there, and a little bit of a gouge out of the spine right there. If it didn't have that gouge, I'd be looking at maybe a 5. But we'll get some compression here along this edge and a little bit of a micro tears, 2 of them. And that corner's folded in. We're going to fold here and blunting here, and I'm rapidly talking myself out of a 4-5 and thinking it might actually be a 4. Be a good looking 4, but I think though, because it has decent eye appeal, well, no, I think I got to go with a 4. It's got some decent eye appeal, except for this. This is what you notice right away. But then when you start looking at it, you see this edge is all folded in. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tears. This corner is kind of floppy. And then we've got that gouge taken out of the spine. So I think we've got to go with a 4. Which is too bad. I was close to calling that a 4-5 or maybe even a 5. All right. Now we've got another one where we have 2 of the same book. Both a newsstand copy. And we can see right away this one's in much better shape than this one. You can see all the stresses here, the blunting in that corner. This one looks much better. Let's have a look-see and see what we got. So you get a little color fade here on this corner. The edge is pretty tight. This edge is nice. A little blunting here. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 little ticks, but you have to look pretty close to see them. Relatively close. Back is pretty bright. None of those ticks we saw in the front really come around to the back. The paper is a little not as white as I might like to have it. Centerfold's okay. That's okay. So I think I'm going to call this one a 7. I initially picked it up thinking it would be a 7.5, but again, there's just too many tick marks right in through here. I mean, again, if you counted them, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15. They're all small, but I think that's going to be a 7. Let's look at this one now. So a 7 is a 7's a fine, very fine. So we have some much heavier ticks here that have become actual tears. This bottom edge is blunted pretty rough. We get a fold here and here, stressing right in there. That's kind of folded some. It's also just generally not as bright and reflective. A little soiling right in here, some blunting. Some of those tears come all the way through to the back. Papers may be about the same. Centerfold's okay. That's all right. So, what do we decide on this? We decided that this one's going to be a 7. And if there were just a fewer ticks here, we could get to a 7.5. And, half again as many, we could be an 8. But we're a 7. Here, I think we're at a 4.5. If some of these weren't as deep, we could be a 5. Or maybe if this corner was tight and didn't have these folds, and it didn't have some of the soiling on the back, it could be a 5. Take a little bit more to get up into the 5, 5, 6 range. So, there you go. There is the difference between a 7, looking at the spine there, and a 4.5, and looking at that spine plus that. Now we're getting to the point where we've got books that look almost like they're new. Well, I say that, but we've got some, I don't know how well you can see it, but if I hold it just right in the light, you can see there's a couple of folds right here. That could be pressed out. If you had a hot press, you could press those folds right out. They don't break color. You won't be able to press out these ticks, though, and there's a good 6 or 7 of them right through there. Top half's a little better. A couple of indentations that, again, could be pressed out. The cover is bent back a little bit where it overhung the pages some. Back cover looks okay. But I think this is another 7. Now, if it didn't have these folds right here, it could be a 7.5. And if that one wasn't so heavy, it could be an 8. But I'm going to call this a 7. And I tell you, someone's going to buy this, they're going to press it, and they're going to turn that 7, there's some folding here too, they're going to turn this 7 into a, depending on who grades it, if they send it to CGC, they could get an 8. They'll probably get closer to a 7.5. Get somebody really picky, they might still get a 7, but pressing that could upgrade that book considerably. I'm calling it a 7, though. I have to grade it for what it is, not what it could be. And here is 244. That last one, by the way, was the first appearance of Mr. Sinister. This one is the first appearance of Jubilee, number 244. Nice and tight and straight and flat all the way around. Got a few ticks here. And you got to be careful because some of these, it looks like a tick, right? You think you've got a little tick mark or a stress and maybe we're breaking the color, but if you look at that back picture, what you're actually seeing is the spokes on that wheel, which have come around to the front, because again the cover is printed not quite exactly, it's not cut exactly straight. And actually it's kilted a little bit too. You can see the back cover shows a little more at the top than it does the bottom. This is a direct sales copy. And this one, once we're getting into the dollar range, what is it, late 80s, early 90s? This is 89. The newsstand sales are really being eclipsed hard by direct sales. So this would be a fairly significant premium if it was a newsstand copy in this grade. But it's a direct sales copy. And again, some of these, what looks like tick, actually aren't. It's just the photo, the spoke showing through. A little blunting right there. These up top, though, are more actual ticks. But I think this book is an easy 8.5. Again, you get a little bit of a fold right here that could be pressed out. A little bit of indentation there that could be pressed out. Some of this on the back, on the edges, you got a little bit of blunting, and that could be pressed flat. But I'm going to call that an 8.5. And with a pressing, that could become a 9 easy, and maybe even a 9 too. All right, this is the last book. This one's a fairly modern book. Well, more modern. What is this, 92? Nice white pages. Almost brilliantly white, which is actually just a function of better paper quality. You get a few stresses here on the back. And I don't know why this book, I always get this book to grade as a single, and I don't know what's special about it. It's the first appearance of somebody I don't even care about. And I think it's a villain, and I think it's this guy, the red somebody. The Red Claw. I don't know. Red Omega. I don't know. Again, somebody I care nothing about. But this book really doesn't go for that much. This book will have a hard job getting to the $10 range, I think. Especially where we've got a stress here. So I think this one's going to be an 8. Again, you got a little stress and blunting there. Some blunting here. You got that staple's pretty high up, and you've got a stress mark at the top of it. You've got a stress here. Another thing that you get with books of this era and later is they're pressed so flat when they're printed that they actually come off the press with a color break along the whole edge of the spine. So you can see here, or I hope you can see, that maybe you can see it right there in her hair. There's a thin color breaking line that runs the whole length of this spine. Right in the middle of it. But it's not noticeable. You only really notice it when you look at it closely, and and again, a lot of books they would come off the press just like that. So it's kind of a minor thing, but I'm going to call this an 8. That's an 8. It's pretty great. And that's it. That was that stack of books. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun anyway. If not listening to me babble about grading, then at least looking at some cool old X-Men comics. Anyway, that's it for this video. We will see you the next time out. And until then, goodbye, good luck, and please be good to each other.